Hello, this is my reading engagement for week 3. This is the choice number 4, the short biographical talk. The author I'm choosing to talk about is Charlotte Perkins Gilman. My name is Torm McAlatin, and let's get started. So, Charlotte Perkins Gilman was born in 1860, and she passed away at the age of 75 in 1935. The cause of death is listed down below. We'll talk about that later, but for now, we'll start with the beginning of her life. She was born to a smaller family in Connecticut. A lot of the information I'll be getting is from the ConnecticutHistory.org website. It's a collection of famous individuals from the state. But she was a very small, quiet personality in the earlier years of her life because she had to take up a lot of the duties and responsibilities that her family needed when her father left when she was younger. But her mom was a single mom who moved around place to place, and she got to witness her mother struggling through trying to provide a full, meaningful life for herself and her kids, but being the era where women's rights were not prevalent or even really spoke of. They were still seen as subservient and members of the household and not really able to do much in the workforce. She witnessed her mom endure a lot of those hardships, but she ended up getting married to an artist named Charles Walter Stetson and had one child with him. Her name was Catherine, but she, after this, would suffer from what we would consider today to be a very serious bout of, it says, a serious bout of postpartum depression. I don't want to sound like it's my own words. I'm taking that from the website I'm reading. She had been diagnosed, or would have been diagnosed with what we call depression today, just in general, because of the experiences of her life. But it wasn't ever fully received or acknowledged by anyone that she ever saw, whether it was the doctor that she was sent to by her husband. Her husband sent her to a doctor named Dr. Silas Mitchell, where after delivering the baby, she would be given what's called the rest cure. And the coolest thing about that is this actually inspired her to write the short story, The Yellow Wallpaper, which will be the main focus of the content that we look at today when comparing her life to her works. She did have a lot of other short stories and books that she's authored, but her most well-renowned is The Yellow Wallpaper. To talk about The Yellow Wallpaper itself, the theme of the story has to do with, it is an advocacy piece for women's rights, but the theme of the book mostly has to do with untapped or unregistered, undocumented, unsubstantiated mental illness. The story talks about a woman who is going slowly but surely more mad and, I guess, insane. Those are both crass words for it, but those are the only words I can think of right now. How she suffers from the fact that she just gave birth. And I don't really know much about postpartum depression myself because I have never done the research into it. But a lot of the story talks about, especially in terms of what her husband sees that she goes through, they both talk about the things that he says she's hallucinating, but she believes is really happening, whether it be the woman that she sees in the wall that is trying to claw out at night, or the fact that her baby terrifies her and she gets so nervous for literally no reason at all. But her husband is basically trying to force her to get better and denies her mental illness completely. And it says that her husband here actually believed a lot of the same things. Her husband was a believer in science and medical practitioners and did not actually think that she was suffering from anything either. So it is very sad to see that she had to go through a lot of the things she did, but it was interesting to see how she compared it to the actual story. We see here, I know the website says that she was told, like in the story, The Yellow Wallpaper, her treatment when she had postpartum depression was that she had to rest for an extensive period of time each day. She was fed, she was bathed and massaged. She didn't do these things herself. Somebody did it for her. And it said that she responded well to treatment, which is interesting because in the story, The Yellow Wallpaper, we see that at parts of the time, Jane, the woman that is being talked about, does seem to get better, and she mentions it to her husband. However, she gets worse by the end of the story. as we see by the ending where she is fully given into the hallucinations that she has. Other treatments that she had was that she had to keep her child with her at all times. She had to lie down after each meal. She wasn't ever supposed to touch a pen, brush, or a pencil for the rest of her life. And I think that is one of the most important things that the story conveys, that Jane, the character, feels like writing is a great release, but it's also a great burden to treat the things that she's going through, but that she also isn't allowed to. And she mentions that it was her husband and her husband's sister that do this, but I think personally that it just talks about authority in general, how authority was trying to suppress the ways that she felt she could make herself better, but they weren't allowing her to because they didn't think that what she was suffering through was real in general, and they thought that she was just being overdramatic or excessive. In fact, I had a specific quote pulled up. Let me see here. There is a line that, yes. It says, "I don't know why I should write this. I don't want to. I don't feel able, and I know John would think it absurd, but I must say what I think and I feel, and I think in some way. It is such a relief." So the fact that she had an outlet to be able to express what she's actually thinking and not have somebody tell her what she's going through, was making her feel better. But when the people around her who are over her are suppressing her and trapping her, much like Charlotte's situation in real life, she really couldn't get out of it. And so she actually ended up divorcing her husband after she, survived through this for years. It was more so like the initial postpartum depression section, but then it boiled over into the rest of like her marriage and her family, and she never could really develop a relationship with her child officially. She did later on, but initially she was not able to because of the oppressive situation. She actually made a very controversial decision. After 4 years of marrying him, divorced him, and took her daughter. In it says the early 19th century. This was something that was considered frowned upon, but she did it. This was the quote that she mentioned. It was taken from her. It says, "It was not a choice between going and staying, but rather between going sane or staying insane." She basically alludes her being trapped in that relationship to being what caused her to go mad, that it wasn't the postpartum depression, it wasn't the baby, it was just because everyone thought she didn't have something that she truly did and oppressed her because of that, that she felt like she had to get out. But it wasn't until the almost turn of the century in 1892 where she published the Yellow Wallpaper, so she had lots of time to develop and work on her crafts of writing, and actually sent one of the first copies of the Yellow Wallpaper to the doctor who gave her the rest cure, the rest treatment, but it was never determined if he actually read it or not. But the piece was more so a way of her to vent and for her to describe her feelings. But in the end, she did send her daughter to live with her previous husband because she could not maintain the relationship or find a way to stably provide for her. But she did remarry, married a man named George Houghton Gilman, and they lived a very happy life together. Over those the years that she was married, it says that she published more than a dozen books, and she had her own magazine. And her husband died unfortunately in 1934, and then she passed away in my bad, I'm sorry about that. She passed away in, I think it was, I said it earlier, 1935. So her husband died a year before her, but she knew that she had, I'm seeing on the website, it says she had inoperable breast cancer, unfortunately. So she, being an advocate for women's rights and things like euthanasia, or being able to have access for everybody, instead of being operated on, opted in to be euthanized. It was more, even her death was a statement than just letting the sickness take over her, because she didn't want her daughter, who was growing up at the time, to see her like that. And she didn't want people to think that, even in death, she didn't want to be, part of a patriarchy. And she was very much not ahead of her time, but she was a pioneer in terms of women's suffrage, and was a huge, huge forerunner, which is actually the name of her magazine. in the world of women's rights. All of these steps that she took, whether it was writing or just making stances publicly, vocally, on the opinions she had, on the truths that are now made law in our documents, are very impressive to me, and I think personally allow for us to see that you don't need to be the big person or have to conform to what society says, because I mean, hey, she divorced when it was not common to do so because she just needed a better headspace, and then she wrote about it and became famous because of the works that she did. And I think it's just personally impressive, and I appreciate you coming to my little biographical talk on Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Thank you. Have a good day.